more disagreement here. I'll take the more on DJ Moore.
Wow, that just sounded so perfectly coming from you. I'm still going to roll with the less.
I can't believe I didn't plan out some sort of pun for that.
Yeah. Here, you want to take a few seconds? Anything coming to you? Let's just move on.
I can tell.
So he's wearing. Hello and welcome to Monkey Knife Fight Live, folks. I'm Connor Rowntree. Today we are joined by Rotowire's Nick Whalen yet again to break down a little Thursday night football. And folks, this week, no slander. We're going all positive vibes. And Nick, I got to ask you, what is your favorite Thursday night football game of all time?
Man, I mean, obviously, all those Jags-Titans showdowns from the last decade are what come to mind first. I think that's pretty much synonymous with Thursday night football. But there are a ton of candidates. I did some extensive research this morning and last night, kind of looking into the history of Thursday night football. The first ever NFL game played on a Thursday all the way back in 1950. We had the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Chicago Cardinals, the latter of which was coached by Curly Lambeau. So this goes pretty far back into the NFL record books. That game didn't seem all that exciting. A total of 11 passes were thrown. The game was heavily on the ground at that point. Pretty unwatchable. But, I'll throw out a few. Jags-Texans 2013. That was Matt Schaub and Case Keenum combining to quarterback the Houston Texans in a loss. The Jags win that game despite Chad Henne going 12 of 27 for 117 yards. Someone named Ace Sanders threw a touchdown pass for the Jaguars in that game. That's when both these teams were down really bad. It was the 2-11 Houston Texans against the 4-9 Jacksonville Jaguars.
So kind of like the 2021 Houston Texans and the 2021 Jacksonville Jaguars.
Kind of, but I think the Texans looked certainly more competent in week one against the Jaguars. The Jaguars had 4 wins at that point. I don't think they're going to have 4 wins come week 13 of this year. One game that I don't think a lot of people, myself included, did not realize was a Thursday night game, and this was a Thanksgiving game. So we're kind of blurring the lines a little bit, but it did kick off at 4:15 p.m. So we're calling that night the Randy Moss meme game, where he had, I think, 3 catches, 163 yards, 3 touchdowns. And there's that famous kind of still shot of him looking at the camera. That was the Thursday game. That was Thanksgiving against the Cowboys. That was a win for Minnesota in 1998, 46-36. So that one's certainly up there. More recently, 2014, I was looking at just the most points scored on a Thursday night game. The Atlanta Falcons have that distinction. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2014, 56-14. Devin Hester had a punt return and a rushing touchdown in that game. So it's kind of crazy how quickly things could swing, because I think if those two teams played on Thursday this year, we'd pretty much get the opposite result.
To me, almost the wildest thing you just said was Devin Hester playing for the Atlanta Falcons. I totally forgot that happened. You know what also happened? Brett Favre suiting up for the New York Jets. Thursday Night Football, November 13th, 2008. Jets beat the Patriots in Foxborough. Patriots obviously tied the game. Randy Moss with 1 second left on the clock. Touchdown sent to OT, and the Jets kick the game-winning field goal with Brett Favre leading the way. So there's a couple guys that you didn't expect on different teams, but Nick and I bringing you all the juicy facts here on MKF Live. Before we get into tonight's Thursday night football matchup, where we got the Carolina Panthers, who are undefeated on the season, 2-0. They are visiting the Houston Texans, who, for all intents and purposes, are they're in shambles right now. The organization with their quarterbacks, to say the very least, with Deshaun Watson, with off-field allegations, and then obviously Tyrod Taylor, you alluded to it earlier. He looked really good in week 1 when the Texans got that win on home field against the Jaguars. But now you got Davis Mills going up against a defense in Carolina that's red hot, a defense that is, well, for the better part, been one of the top defenses in the NFL in the first 2 weeks, and allowing just 10.5 points per game through that point, and obviously that comes to just 21 points combined through the first 2 games. Do I think that Davis Mills is going to kickstart this Houston offense? He's got the weapons to do it with Cooks around him. I do not think he's going to go for 210 yards against Panthers defense. That's playing great football, and just took Jameis Winston and held Jameis Winston to 111 yards last week. Nick, what do you think of Davis Mills?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this Carolina defense. I think that's been the story so far, and certainly they benefited from playing the Jets in week 1, but I think that was a quality showing against the Saints in week 2, and I think we're going to need a little more of a sample to see just how good the Saints team is. But they cruised to 38 points against the Green Bay Packers, who maybe have one of the worst defenses in the league. But either way, it's certainly a higher powered offense than what we saw out of the New York Jets. So you have one easy opponent, one opponent that you feel okay about shutting down. But this Panthers defense, number 1 in the league in yards allowed, number 1 in the league in number of opponent plays, and number 1 in the league in terms of opponent rushing yards. So, they've been able to win the line of scrimmage, pretty much bury teams early on, and not relent these leads over the second half. So I think we see something similar tonight. I mean, Carolina is an 8-point favorite on the road in this game, and I think that says more about how Vegas feels about the Houston Texans, maybe more so than it does Carolina, because there's still a little bit of small sample with this Carolina team, new quarterback, not a ton of recognizable playmakers outside of Christian McCaffrey. So I don't think everyone's ready to say this is like a top 5 team in the league, but they're in a really good position, I think, to move to 3-0 and set up a really intriguing game at Dallas next week. When it comes to Davis Mills, I'm with you, Connor. I think you have to go under here, right? I mean, he looked okay, I guess, in relief last week. 8 of 18, 102 yards, did have a touchdown, but also threw a pick. He's not a rushing threat whatsoever. This is a team that's pretty much devoid of weapons at the running back position, as well as the receiver position. I know we'll get into that in a little bit, but man, 215.5 is not that high of a total, but I think the one thing that concerns me is, Houston's likely going to be down in this game and, going to be throwing a ton in the second half. So do we see a situation like we saw on Monday night with Jared Goff, where they're, even in the rain, they're just like, look, we just need to keep moving the ball. We're just going to have you drop back and throw it every time. That might result in 3 or 4 picks from Davis Mills, but there is a chance that he racks up some kind of garbage time yardage in this game. So that does scare me. But with that said, I'll join you on the under there, Connor.
Yeah, the one thing that when I was looking at, I was also worried about the garbage time yards. But when I was looking at it, it was like, what, Houston's defense, they showed up pretty well against Jacksonville at home. They're going to be at home. They're going to have the crowd behind them. So that makes me think that it's just going to be a closer game. And they have 3 really talented running backs. So they'll be able to cycle guys in and out and hopefully be able to burn some clock to keep it close, at least hopefully for guys like you and I that really think the less. And it's not so much a knock on Davis Mills, although I did see him play when he was at Stanford. I saw him play at Notre Dame, and one thing I picked up just in the stands was he stares down receivers. And if he does that against a Carolina team that held Jameis Winston to just 11 completions and intercepted him twice last week, Davis Mills could have a long Thursday night, and it could be a long Thursday night for anyone that bought a ticket that is a fan of the Houston Texans. But flipping over to the other side of the ball, Sam Darnold at 270 and a half, 271 and a half, or 270 and a half, pardon me. So needs 271. He's gone for more than 200. I believe he's gone for at least 279 yards in each of the first 2 games. So he has the pattern of going for more. However, I think this will be a run-heavy attack from the Carolina Panthers. I think being on the road, they'll want to take the crowd out of it. They'll want to make it boring, and we'll see a lot of Christian McCaffrey. That could result in screen passes. But again, I think I'm going for the less with Sam Darnold, and I think a lot more of a CMC this week. Nick, how do you see Sam Darnold's line at the 270 and a half?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're not in agreement on all these, but I think you laid that out pretty well. I think I'm going to go under as well. He was at 279 yards in week 1 against the Jets, 305 yards last week against New Orleans. So he's certainly capable of going over, but I think, when you start to look at how we project this game to play out, I don't know that Carolina, wins like 41-0 or anything like that, but I think they probably hold a comfortable lead for a decent chunk of this game. And like you said, it's Christian McCaffrey, and some of that could be screen passes, could be swing passes out of the backfield that obviously count towards Sam Darnold's yardage. But I think Carolina, if they can keep this game on the ground, keep the clock running, get out of there with a win, they'll be happy to do that. So I don't see this as a game where you're asking Sam Darnold to go out there and give you 350 yards and win the game for you. I think you're confident that you can win it on the ground. I do think he probably racks up a lot of yardage in the first half. This under might not look great at halftime. But assuming Carolina does take care of business and this game, is somewhat in hand going into the second half, I think we see a more conservative game plan out of Matt Rule, and Darnold probably goes just under.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with you there. When I was looking at it, I was thinking 240, 250 is kind of the range where I see Sam Darnold tonight on Thursday Night Football against, you know what? It's going to be a Houston team they haven't given up on the season, right? They're 1-1. They got a chance to play at home, and it is a winnable matchup. Carolina, it's going to be tough, but it is doable. That's why they play the games, right? Any given Sunday, there's literally 180,000 movies about football inspirational plays. It happens from time to time.
180,000.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you taking the less our producer says. Okay, well, if we go from like every high school like drama, like if we include like the Hoosiers in there, get some NBA, get a little everything in there, we're probably at like maybe 5,000, maybe. So yeah, the under on the less on the 180,000 was definitely the right call. A bit of exaggeration there, but something that I won't be exaggerating on is Brandin Cook's receiving line tonight. He's listed in on Monkey Night Fight at 71.5 yards receiving. You know what? He's gone more and more to start the season, but that's with Tyrod Taylor having a great first game against the Jaguars and slinging it in the opening half, at least before he got hurt. I'm going to have to go with less. I don't think that Mills is going to move the ball all that effectively against this Carolina defense, and 71.5 yards is a lot, so I have to go less. Sorry, Brandon.
Yeah, I think I like the less as well, but for the sake of argument, I'll go more. 71.5 is probably a little bit higher than I would have expected. I think with the drop-off in quarterback play is the number one thing here, right? If Tyrod Taylor is starting this game, I think 71.5 is a really fair number going up against what's been like the number one defense in the league so far. But with Davis Mills, like there's so much uncertainty. I think if this number was dropped down to like 55.5 yards, then it would kind of be a 50-50 for me. But man, 71.5 is a little high given the quarterback situation. With that said, I mean, you mentioned 132 yards for Cooks in week 1, 78 yards on 14 targets in week 2. So he's been the number one guy by a mile. Still no Danny Amendola for Houston this week. I mean, it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, who else are they throwing to? Their number 2 receiver is ex-Jaguar Chris Conley. Anthony Miller is going to be in the mix tonight. Andre Roberts is going to be in the mix. I mean, you don't have any weapons really at tight end. Farrell Brown is the number one guy there. Like, I do think like if this does turn into a situation where Houston's down and they're throwing the ball a ton, even if it's an inefficient night for Mills, even if there are 2 or 3 picks sprinkled in there, if he can get to even like 200 yards or 190 yards, there's a pretty good chance that a large swath of those going to Brandin Cooks. So I'm sure that's the thinking with the number here. I'll go more. I don't want to agree on everything. I think Brandin Cooks, even in an innocent night for Davis Mills, is able to haul in 8 or 9 catches for maybe like 80, 85 yards.
Well, one thing to the Brandin Cooks point that I could see happening in this game, because he is such a playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. They have 3 skilled running backs, but all 3 of them now are towards the tail end of the careers, is a couple screen passes, picks up maybe 10, 20 yards in the first half, fighting for yards, and then in that garbage time, boom, late shot, gets close to the 70, but I'm still going with the less. But yeah, he is a deep threat. We've seen it this season. He's so fast, and that's kind of what he's been known for through the duration of his career, no matter what team he's played on. DJ Moore on the other side at 77.5 yards. Sam Darnold throwing the ball. As I said earlier, I think it's going to be a very high run script. And I think it's going to be a lot of Christian McCaffrey. I think DJ Moore is going to get involved. He's a big target, but 77.5 yards, I'm not sure on that. He doesn't seem to me, or from what I've seen this season, to be their deep target. Robbie Anderson seems to get the deeper shots, where DJ Moore, for me, from what I've seen at least, seems to be the more consistent target. So I'm going to have to go towards the less on this one. Not as confident, but I'm going to lean towards the less. Nick, how do you see that one?
I think I'm going to go more here. You mentioned Robbie Anderson. I think he's maybe still the bigger name in that receiving core, but he's kind of the home run threat. He's turned into like the modern Deshaun Jackson, where if you're starting him in fantasy, you're just hoping that he has like a 77-yard touchdown, because the volume is not necessarily going to be there. It's kind of deep shots or nothing with him. Whereas, DJ Moore has really emerged, I think, as the go-to guy for Sam Darnold through these first 2 games. I mean, 6 catches, 80 yards in week 1, 8 catches, 79 yards in week 2. The targets have been there. He's playing like almost 90% of the snaps on offense. So, I mean, he's not your traditional number one. I don't think they really have a true number one on this team, but that's not always a bad thing. I mean, if you have multiple guys who you can kind of trust and who offer versatile skill sets, I don't really think that's the worst thing. So, we'll see how much we can really trust this Carolina offense to really have the pedal to the metal throughout this game. Like we said, I think there's a decent chance that they get ahead early and, we kind of run out the clock in the second half and you're not taking a ton of deep shots. But I think DJ Moore's been involved enough that I trust him, even if they get, let's say, 3 or 4 drives, in that first half where you're really going for it. I mean, I think he could have 5 or 6 catches, throughout that span. And, given his yards per catch, you're looking at probably right around 70, 75 yards. So more disagreement here. I'll take the Moore on DJ Moore.
Wow, that just sounded so perfectly coming from you. I'm still going to roll with the less.
I can't believe I didn't plan out some sort of pun for that.
Yeah. Here, you want to take a few seconds? Anything coming to you? Or should we just move on?
Yeah,
I can tell. So he's wearing. Yeah, there you go. Nick's wearing a Jaguars hat today, folks, with his Jaguars mug. We're out of T-shirts, but still keeping it fresh and stylish for you. There you go, folks. Those are the picks. I'm going less and less. Nick Whalen going more and more. So obviously one of us is going to be right, which is good. So bases covered on that one, Nick. On to the next one, Christian McCaffrey. It's been kind of like this for the last 2 or 3 seasons where it's been just a Christian McCaffrey draft lottery, the consensus number 1 pick in fantasy, the number 1 guy to watch with the football in the league. It's been absolutely awesome to see him play. I'm taking the more on this. I know he hasn't. I don't think he's gone for over that this season, at least in my I don't have him going for over 90 yards this season, but on the ground that is. But I think he does it tonight in a second half where I see the Carolina Panthers running the ball a whole heck of a lot. And with some outside runs, he could break one of those and realistically get half of that in a single run. So I'm going to go with more on Christian McCaffrey.
This is a really, really tough number. I think that's spot on, at 89.5. I think I'll go less. Obviously, he does so much damage through the air as well that he rarely puts up, the Derrick Henry kind of rushing totals, but when you combine them, that's where you get the ultimate impact. I'll go under on the 89.5. I think if it does get to a situation like we keep saying where we think they're going to be running the ball in the third and fourth quarters, I don't think you want to be running Christian McCaffrey into the ground. If you're up 2 scores with 8 minutes left, I don't think you're pounding McCaffrey into the line every time. I think that's where we see Chuba Hubbard or somebody like that, who you're not really trying to burn any reps for McCaffrey in a situation where you don't have to. A guy who's had some injury issues in the past. So I'll go less on the yardage. I think he probably approaches it in the first half and then probably cools off in that regard in the second. I know do we have a 5.5 receptions?
Yes, there is.
There was
that one
yesterday.
I do like.
Yeah, that one.
The more on that would be great.
Yeah, I'm with you on the more on that too. As you said, he's just such a versatile back and he picks up yards anywhere you can get him the ball. He's really one of those guys where it's just get him the football, get him in space and see what he can do. Another contest that was there on the screen was Mr. Mark Ingram. He's kind of taken the lead role out of the trio of backs in Houston. 26 attempts in the first week, 85 yards and a touchdown. So that's almost, we're looking like old school Mark Ingram in the Saints days there. Last week, a little bit slower, 14 touches for 41 yards, but both of them exceed this line. The thing is, there's still 2 other solid backs. Phillip Lindsay's there. Phillip Lindsay, I would assume, is more of a third down back. And I think there's going to be a lot of third down situations in this game. I'm going to have to go less on this one. It's a lot of less with more on Christian McCaffrey. I sound like a Christian McCaffrey fanboy and hating on everyone else. It's just the game script that I see. But Mark Ingram, I think he could have like 35 yards and a touchdown. I think that's like a comfortable point. But 36 yards, 37 yards, I don't see it.
So it's the extra 2 yards. Like I just can't push it up. I mean, it is really
I can't
tough.
do it.
Like,
not against this Carolina defense. You said it. They've given up the fewest rush yards in the league. If he was the only back in the backfield, I'd say hammer them more. But the thing is, I've watched his rushing attempts get cut in half from 26 to 14. So if this trend continues, he's going to be at like 7 or 6. So I don't know, man. It just, there's too many question marks around that Houston backfield for me to be comfortable with the more. You start out, the good news is when you take the less, you start out winning with the less. I'm riding with the less.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Phillip Lindsay. That's a concern. David Johnson as well. I mean, it kind of is I wouldn't say quite equal opportunity backfield, but you have 3 pretty decent options. And Ingram does appear to be the favorite of the 3 when it comes to traditional running. Lindsay does a little more out of the backfield. David Johnson can catch the ball. With Ingram, he's not really a threat in that regard at all. If he's in the game, he's probably going to be running the ball between the tackles. If you could guarantee me that he's going to get at least 10 carries in this game, I think I like his chances to get over 36.5, but it's kind of a push and pull, right? Like if we think the Texans are going to be trailing in the second half, that means they're probably throwing the ball a ton, but you also have an inexperienced rookie quarterback who could be in real trouble against this defense. And then it's like, okay, how much do you really want to cut him loose? Like if he has 3 picks going into the fourth quarter, are you just going to keep firing away? At that point, do you just kind of try to get out of there and start running the ball a little bit? I don't know, man. 6.5 is such a low total for a guy who carried the ball 24 times a couple of weeks ago. 26 times a couple of weeks ago. I don't necessarily think, we're going to see this progressive, like layoff in carries where all of a sudden he's, cutting it in half every week. That Jaguars game to me is kind of an aberration just because they were up so big early that they were kind of in the position that we think Carolina is going to be in when it comes to running the ball a ton in the second half. I don't think they're going to have that luxury this week, but man, 36.5 is so low. Even going up against this defense, man, if he can just break 1 for like 11 yards, you're a third of the way there. And if he can carry the ball 6 or 7 more times the rest of the game, I would like his chances to get like 20 to 25 yards on those carries. So, everything you said adds up, but by virtue of this number being so low, I'll go the more.
I'm gonna throw one more counter at you about Mark Ingram, right? If your points are all completely valid, if it's Mark Ingram that we saw even in Baltimore and of course in New Orleans, but the thing is he's a little bit older, and 85 yards, 26 attempts, it sounds like 2 big numbers. It comes to about 3 yards a carry. Last week, right. 14 attempts, 41 yards. That's less than 3.5 yards per carry, or actually right around 3.5, if my math is correct. Yeah. So he's not averaging the same yards and the same chunks that we've seen from Mark Ingram to make me comfortable to get those numbers. If he gets 10 and he's averaging 3, then he's still right around 30, right? So especially against the best rushing defense in the league, I agree with you. The number is low, but defense wins championships. That was my one little counter to you on that one there, Nick. And boom, gotcha. Michael Scott moment. Or we'll see what happens. Honestly, I could just be foot and mouth syndrome here again on Monkey Knife Fight Live, just like every other time that we're on here. Man.
Like you said earlier, man, one of us is going to be right. So we'll find out.
Yeah, that we will. Any other contests that we need to take a look at for on Monkey Knife Fight that you were zeroing in on, Nick?
No, I mean, if Jason wants to throw any out there, we can discuss them. But these are the ones that I've been.
Yeah, I just had one that I wanted to touch on, if that's all right. Can we go to the rapid fire contest? I know Jason hates that I do these rapid fires, but they're so much fun. I love the versus idea.
That's not true. There's nothing I hate that you do, Connor. I only love
That's you. It. No, you're on it. It's only the first one.
Only love.
Very first one. Keeping it simple tonight. Yeah, I'm taking Sam Darnold in the passing. I'm taking DJ Moore in the receiving. As we said earlier, I think it's a run-heavy script. I don't trust Mills. I think Cooks can get some shots, but Moore is the more secure target. I have him starting in fantasy tonight, so I'm doubling down on Moore in this one. But no, seriously, I think Sam Darnold is going to be the much more effective quarterback. I believe it's 60 yards. I think that was the plus when I was looking at it. So I think Mills has 60 yards in hand. That's okay with me. Darnold can literally get that back in one drive. Nick, how do you see this now? It's the first time you're looking at it, but how do you see this one playing out?
60.5 passing yard bonus is so many yards.
They have
no one has any faith in the Stanford Cardinal.
It's not that I don't have faith in the Stanford Cardinal. It's that this defense held Jameis Winston, a guy that threw 5 touchdowns in week 1, to 111 yards.
I'm just being sarcastic. I actually agree with your take, Connor.
60 60.5 is a lot, though. I mean, that's a lot for Darnold to cover in a game where we think, that they might be up quite a bit and kind of laying off things in the second half. I'll go the other way. Look, I don't think we see a massive game from Darnold. So if we think Darnold's going to throw for 250 yards, I think Davis Mills can get to 190. I think that seems realistic.
Interestingly, too, the line opened at 185.5 for Davis Mills on Monday or Tuesday. And so the fact that it went up to 215.5 means a lot of people, I think, were smashing them more. That's the only reason it would have gone up so much. I know it also went up pretty quickly from 185.5 to 195.5 over a very short period when it first went up. But it's probably...
And now it's settled, but just to note,
yes,
it's settled back down to 210.
Yep.
People are starting to lean. People are starting to lean with, as Jason would call me, the Mr. Sport Tree Man or Tree Sport Man. There it is. Yeah, folks, that was my last little tidbit I wanted to get in there for tonight. I do believe in the Panthers tonight on the road. I think they're going to get the win. I think they'll walk out of Houston tonight with the Monarch, the perfect Panthers. Nick, final thoughts on the game?
I think you said it. I think Carolina covers that 8-point spread on the road. I think they moved to 3-0. I'm glad to see it. I mean, people always say it. The NFL is better when the Panthers are good.
Who says that?
No one has ever said that.
Steph Curry says that? Is that
my best friend, who is a Jaguars fan, says that. Oh no, my best friend who's the Panthers fan, because you're the Jaguars fan. Big cat guy. You're a big cat guy. Eh? Big cat supporter.
I am. The Panthers are the closest, relative to the Jaguars, I think, in the NFL. They're like the Jaguars' sister team.
I guess there's Lions too. We can mix in Lions. But next time, folks, we'll bring up the African Safari, the African Lion Safari next time here on Monkey Night Fight Live. Folks, that is Nick Whalen from Rotowire. You can find him on Twitter at Whalen with the 1 in there. Make sure you give him a follow. It's some pretty funny stuff. I'm Connor Rowntree. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow on Monkey Night Fight Live. And remember to hit.